Welcome to our online makeup class for Chapter 8, which is all about unit lesson planning. The author of your book wants you to take a look at planning a curriculum unit in kind of a different way. You have different roles as you go through: a curriculum planner, an assessment planner, an activity planner, and a resource planner. So let's take a look at what all those key component parts go into making that unit plan. So when we talk about curriculum planning, we're talking about knowing the subject. Do you know the background knowledge? Do you know the skills, attitude, values that are essential to coming down and really teaching that lesson? So this goes back to what we were talking about with the National Council for the Social Studies and those key things in social studies. But beyond that, it also means, do you know the background knowledge? If you're teaching the Revolutionary War and what's leading up to it and the causes of the revolution, do you know what those are? Do you know what the most important aspects of that is? So it's really you becoming an expert in your subject area and really knowing those systems and the curriculum that you're going to teach the students. The second aspect is the assessment planner, and this comes in a couple different ways. We're not talking just about assessment at the end with our summative or final assessment. We're talking about formative checks too, checking for comprehension along the way so that we can tweak our instruction as we go along. And it also means all the other data that you gather from just observing students in class to a variety of different things. The activity planner is the actual lessons that you're going to deliver. So this is how you're going to convey that curriculum to the students. So once you know what's really important and what you want to go and get at, and you have a good idea of that, then you can build your activities or your lessons around those central ideas. So everything you do goes back to that central idea and curriculum. And then resource planner. Literally, what do you need to do this? If you're going to do an activity that uses an app, well, you're definitely going to need the iPads and the apps downloaded and things like that. It can be as simple as I need an Elmo or I need this curriculum resource, but you need to know what you need so that when you step in front of the students, you got everything that you need for that lesson and that unit. And then, of course, when you put these all together, you make a coherent unit, one that has a focus, one that's lessons are tailored to the learning goals, one that you are monitoring constantly as you go through, that your students will get something really meaningful out of at the end. So we said one of the first things that we need to do when we plan a unit is know the curriculum, and you need to be that curriculum planner. Used to be you went and you had in the beginning of your book just the set of standards, and you got to choose which ones you were going to focus on, which ones were going to be secondary, and you got to pick and choose how you really spent your time. Well, we've kind of moved away from that. In Pasco County and a lot of other counties around the state of Florida, what we have these days are unit planners. So these are given out by the district office, and they help us focus in on the essential standards. So as you see over here in our first column, you have essentially we're on Unit 4 in this unit, which is the 6th grade curriculum. We're talking about the events leading up to the American Revolution. So we have kind of a general statement about what this unit's about. And this one's the American Revolution was inspired by ideas about freedom and liberty to help people define their rights as citizens and the ability to govern themselves. Well, that's pretty broad. And it encompasses a lot of different standards. And here they are in the second column. This column here is going to be our focus content standards. These are the standards that you really should be covering throughout this lesson. And then we also have some highlighted standards. Our focus standards are the ones that are most important to us as we are going through. They're the essential ones. Highlighted standards are things that don't directly tie back to this statement, but sometimes they're skills that you need, analysis tools, or just if you get to it, those are nice things to cover standards. The Pasco County Curriculum Guides also help you out by going deeper into what the curriculum really drives at. So our second page of a Pasco County one you will get vocabulary that is essential. So these are vocabulary terms that's essential for you to do, or for you to know. We also have textbook resources. This is our new TCI History Alive, as well as some of the old books that we used for this. But this is kind of one of the nice things, especially about Pasco County Curriculum Map, is you have vertical alignment. You get to see the standards in 5th grade here that led up to what you're doing in the 6th grade curriculum. And then you get to see how it ties into 7th grade and then also into the 9th through 12th grade standards. And here's where it really gets to the part where you need. So for us in Pasco County, we use focus questions or learning targets. So these are the essential things we want the students to learn. This second column here is where we really are. This is our learning targets. These are tied to the standards, and these are statements about what we want our students to be able to do. The first column just kind of puts it in a question-based form. When we look at this section here, which has our learning targets, these are what we use in our scales. These are the things that we want our students to know, and we gear our scales, which are representations of what we want students to know in the end, which are tied to the standards. This column gives us kind of the basis for what we would call mastery of this unit. So if a student's going to master this unit, they're going to be able to do all of these learning targets. Skipping ahead a little bit in our curriculum planning, when you're looking at Resource Manager, this section here is real nice for Pasco County because it gives you a list of different resources that can be used to reach these learning targets. Another thing that's very nice about the Pasco County unit plans is we also have a section of different strategies to be helpful to be used with ELL as well as ESE students. And then we also have enrichment strategies for our advanced learners. While we remediate with Tier 2 interventions for students that did not get the concept the first time and we have to go reteach, this second column here gives you ideas of how to expand upon the concepts that were covered for those kids that got it the first time. How can they take it to the next level while you're doing reteach activities with your students? And then we've got our scales. Scales are very important, especially when we're talking about any district that uses Robert Marzano's framework. We want our students to be able to verbalize where they are in their achievement of our learning goals. And these statements, level 3 is what we call a mastery level. Level 4 is an extension. This is going above and beyond. So if we reach level 3, we've achieved mastery. We have grasped the concepts that we were looking to do. Levels 2 and 1 deal with where am I before mastery. As I'm moving towards mastery, where am I? And these scales allow students to verbalize. If you use them correctly, they allow students to verbalize where they are in this process. And research shows if a student can verbalize where they are, say, okay, I am not at a level 3 mastery because I cannot identify political and economic relationships between the colonists and Great Britain. But I am at least a level 2 because I can tell you what these vocabulary terms mean. I can tell you what militia is, I can tell you what tyranny is, I can tell you what repeal. You get the idea. So this allows students to verbalize, and it gives you a benchmark to, as you move through the unit, to have the students reflect on where they are, and it also helps you identify if they can verbalize where they're at. It also helps verbalize where the gaps are that you can use, and you can utilize that information to retool your instruction, do reteach activities, and recover those things that you need to, so that when you get to the end, your students are going to show mastery on your summative or final exam. So let's move ahead to talking about teaching the unit. Now, the curriculum map that we just covered from Pasco County does some of the things that your author talked about in the actual unit planning section. Things like framing the learning objectives. So those level 3 things that we saw on the scale, Those are our learning objectives. That's what we want our students to know by the end. And by knowing those objectives, we can prioritize, we can target instruction, and really not waste time, and actually everything we do becomes about achieving that learning goal. And when we do that, we can determine assessments and things like that as well. But when it comes to teaching the unit, your author has 3 different phases or sections of teaching a unit. And good planning involves the beginning, the middle, and the end. And that's what phase 1, 2, and 3 here are. Launching the unit, phase 1. Phase 2, developing the study with learning activities. And phase 3, concluding the study. Now, with phase 1, we're looking at the launch of the unit. We're looking at something that's going to grab their attention and get them interested in what we're about to talk about. So a lot of things that can be done when we are trying to pique people's curiosities. We can do dramatizations. We can do situational things that relate to them. So one of the biggest problems with history is we're talking about concepts sometimes 100 or 200 years in the past. It's really hard to relate. What was it like to be in, say, going back to our revolution example, what was it like to be a colonist? What was it like to be under British rule and feel like people were stepping on your rights? Well, we can draw corollaries to today. For example, think of the Dakota Sioux and the Standing Rock protests that happened just last year. Those Native American groups felt like the government was stepping on their rights by running a pipeline through their sovereign territory. So just as the Native American population felt that the American government was stepping on their rights, same thing was happening with the colonists and the British. And it can translate as simple for the students as their parents being the government and they're the citizens, and sometimes they feel like their rights are trampled on. It's about making the connection. But we can also do things like dramatization, hands-on activities. If you're going to study the Industrial Revolution and the advent of assembly lines, one of my favorite things to do was paper airplanes. You can have them each make paper airplane on their own, and they'll notice that have them do that. That's like pre-industrial revolution. Then put them in groups. Have them each do one part of folding the paper airplane, and you can show them that individually is a lot slower than when they're working together on an assembly line. Things like that would be a good hook for an activity like that. And it's a simulation, it's putting them in there, it's giving them a hands-on thing. So you want to try to do something that's going to wow them and go, hey, I want to learn about that. Once you get to the next step, we have to develop the study with learning activities. Now, going back to the Pasco County map, we want to make sure that our activities are tied directly to the standards we're teaching, those learning targets at level 3 of the learning scale. So when you're developing the study and learning activities, this is also where we're starting to look at how we're going to formatively assess everything. And everything should go back to your goal. So for back here looking at the learning scale, if I'm doing a revolutionary unit, my lesson should be tailored around describing colonial life in America from the perspective of all these different groups: landowners, farmers, women, African Americans, and American Indians, as well as indentured servants. So it gives you, we have to talk about all these different groups of people and what life was like for them. So we need a lesson that talks about that. Then we need to identify political and economic relationships. So how was the British government working with the colonists? How was trade happening? Because that's our economic relationship. The trade between the U.S., or at that time, the American colonies and Great Britain. We'll also need to look at identifying political ideas that shaped the American Revolutionary Movement and led to the Declaration of Independence. So when we're looking at this, we're looking at the causes of the revolution, because the Declaration itself is a laundry list of the different things that we thought were going wrong. So you have to look at what were the colonists. You have to have a lesson that talks about what were the colonists upset about and how did their anger over these things lead to the revolution. Last but not least, we'll need this. Explain how the colonies were successful in defeating Great Britain during the Revolutionary War. So this is where we actually talk about the war, the conflict, and the strategies that were used by the colonists to win the war. Your author also gives you a lot of ideas when it comes to learning activities that you can do. It's listed within the chapter. There are things like construction activities, dramatic activities, shared activities, experiments, music, discussions, art, field trips, virtual field trips, activities for processing, all kinds of hands-on and different ways of accessing that knowledge. And you want to look at the needs of your students as you're doing this planning, because as you get to know your kids throughout the year, you'll know which activities are going to be more beneficial to them and which ones are not going to be the best tailored to their learning needs. When we get to phase 3, we're talking about concluding the study. So this is where your students are going to show their mastery. So this is going to be how they show you they've reached that level 3 or level 4 on the learning scale. So this is where you're going to do summarization activities. It's where you're going to have your summative test. Is it going to be a multiple choice thing? Is it going to be a written thing? Is it going to be an essay? Is it going to be a show and tell? There are a lot of different ways to do it. It doesn't always have to be paper and pencil. There are a lot of different ways for students to show mastery. From doing a dramatization where they create a video and do a news report or something. There's a lot of different activities, and those activities should be tailored, just like everything else through this point, to those learning goals. So what you want them to display should reflect the learning goals within the scale. So now we get to planning lessons within the units. So before we jump into what your author talks about, let's talk about what a lot of the counties around here are using when we are reflecting on planning a lesson and what to do within it. And that is the Marzano framework. All right, if you have not seen it before, this is Robert Marzano's framework for lesson planning and looking at instruction within a classroom. We've got 3 different segments here. The first one is routine events, and these are broken into subcategories called design questions. So when we look at planning a unit, there are a few essential parts that we really need to look at. What we're going to look at in this first section is what we call DQ1 here. So when we look at DQ1, it's communicating our learning goals. So we want to start with a clear learning goal, scales, rubrics. So you want from the very first second you start on a lesson, you want the goal to be clear to the students. If the student knows what the goal is, they can then work toward achieving that goal. And Marzano says it's not only just enough to show them the scale or have them know, they need to track their progress and definitely celebrate the successes. Whether they're the big ones at the end or the little ones along the way, celebrate those successes. You'll motivate your students a lot more and you'll get a lot more out in the end. But for the purposes of playing the lesson within the unit, we are mainly looking at this center section right here. This is addressing the content. DQs 2, 3, and 4 are all about the actual lessons we teach. So the first part of addressing content for Marzano is about helping students interact with new knowledge. It's DQ2. We call these acquisition lessons. This is when you first introduce a new concept to a student. And the nice thing about Marzano is they give you ideas about what kind of things do you want to do. Well, we want to identify critical information, key vocabulary terms, things like that. We want to organize students to interact with the new knowledge. So collaborative grouping and think, pair, shares, things like that. Previewing new content. So having them think about what they built on and previewing some new content. Chunking into digestible bites. So don't throw it all at them at once. Little by little. And taking breaks as you go along. And then we go through processing and elaborating on new information. How are you going to record all this new information that you're learning? And then, just like us, we should always be reflecting on how we teach. the students should be reflecting as well on their end. As we move down into DQ3, we're looking at the next part. How are we going to, once we've taught them the initial concepts, how are we going to dig deeper? How are we going to dig down and give them a deeper knowledge of that? So, these are the kind of strategies that we use to deepen that knowledge. We use review, organization, students to practice and deepen knowledge. So work groups and things like that to delve into things deeper, reflection groups, things like that. Utilizing homework, examining similarities and differences. So we're starting to touch on some higher order thinking skills here. Examining for errors in reasoning. So this can be utilizing that homework. Hey, take a look at where things went wrong. Okay, why did we get this wrong? Okay, let's discuss why there's a misconception there. And that's a wonderful way to deepen knowledge. We can do practicing skills and strategies and processes. And then, of course, look again. Here we go. Revising knowledge. So once we found out if we had a misconception, let's go back and fix that and revise what we know and deepen it there. Where we really get into higher order thinking is right here in DQ4. This is where we hypothesize and take it to a next level. We start looking at those very complex tasks. We look at generating a hypothesis. With my information, what do I think is going to happen next? Or given this set of circumstances, what's going to happen? This is what DQ4 is all about. A lot of our teachers spend their lives in DQ2. Teachers that are a little more refined and have DQ2 really under control start delving into DQ3, but DQ4, even for veteran teachers, is very hard to get to, but is where we're going to see mastery level happen. It's where we're going to see that extension level into that level 4 of the learning scale. So let's now go back to your author's take on planning unit lessons. So if you look at number 1, there's objectives again. When you know the objective, you have a better idea of what activities you can do to achieve that objective. So knowing those objectives is key. I can't say that enough. Knowing your objectives is key because everything that you plan, every lesson that you do, should go back to that objective. All right, so we have, as we were talking about earlier, there are 3 basic phases of any lesson: the beginning, the middle, and the end. For Marzano, that's DQ 2, 3, and 4. Knowledge acquisition, deepening that knowledge, and then that DQ 4, that extension, that hypothesization, that really delving deep and taking the next logical step with the knowledge we know. Number 3, assessments, diagnostics, formative, and summative. I want to focus in on formative assessments. Formative assessments are your checks along the way. It's where you go check in to see if your students are progressing toward the goals. The scales can be useful. If you have taught them how to talk about their learning based on the scale, that having them do a ticket out the door where they can tell you where they are on the scale is useful. You can also use quizzes along the way. You can use observation, notebook checks. These are all formative things that you can assess where they're at before you get to the summative, which is the end. Because if the first time you really check to see if they know it is the end, you're going to lose out on a lot of key instructional time and you're going to lose out on a lot of opportunities. We should always be revising what we do. We talk about action research cycles. We're going to make a plan, implement that plan, put it in place, and then we're going to look at what happened. We're going to revise it so we can keep going. Formative checks are key in that. If the first time we're checking if they got us the end, well, we've missed a lot of opportunities to retool what we're doing and get through to the students. So please, 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 make sure you use formative assessments, and they can take a variety of different roles. You need to look at your needed instructional materials. So as we talked about, this is your resource planner. What do I need? Once I have looked at the objective, I've decided what I want to do, what do I need to do it, so that when you get there in front of the students, you got everything you need for that lesson. And then, of course, look at your accommodations. For our ELL and ESE students, what are those extra supports that you can put in place? Whether it's peer buddies, whether it is sentence starters, things like that. What are the things that you are going to do that are going to help those kids along the way? So let's take a look at the last topic that your author goes over, 5 ways to enrich any unit. And since we're in a course called Literacy, Literature, and Social Studies, let's start talking about incorporating reading instruction. So this is where we talk about those key concepts you're going to talk about with Miss Hatton, as well as in some of the other courses you've taken that really speak to literacy in the classroom. So we're going to talk about previewing and skimming and summarizing and note-taking, closed reads, text coding. Things like this are all key in this kind of thing. So what you see in the picture here is a good example of incorporating reading strategies in instruction. You see a couple of my former students here, and they've got a pink sheet and a white sheet in front of them. The light pink sheet was actually an article we were going over, and you'll notice in front of this young lady, there's all kinds of underlines, there's scribbles, there's notes in the margin. They were doing a few things. They were underlying key concepts, they were text coding, they were looking at this example, we were looking at articles related to a topic we were talking about in relationship to the President of the United States. This activity was done right after the Sandy Hook shooting, the Sandy Hook Elementary shooting. So we were looking at gun control, and we were looking at people that supported the president's gun control measures and those that were opposed. So people like the NRA that really supported the Second Amendment and fewer gun control regulations, whereas President Obama at that time was really going after more gun control. So this was only one of several articles we read, and they were reading it for, is the author siding with the president or are they siding with, say, gun lobbies like the NRA? So they had the text code. And they were text coding with a P for this agrees with the president, or an O, this is the opposition to the president. So they were going through and they were underlying key facts, and they were also finding things that agreed with the president and people that didn't disagree, and then they were putting it into a 2 column. So what were the things from the article that they found that were in favor of the president's stance and what were in favor of the opposition stance? So we're text coding, we're utilizing note-taking skills, underlining, we're categorizing, we're doing a lot of different literacy skills, but these literacy skills help break down complex texts. And social studies has some of the most complex texts out there. The Declaration of Independence is a complex text. Not only is it written at a high reading level, but it utilizes a grammar structure that is 200 years removed from modern grammar. So when you utilize these strategies, it can help overcome those hurdles, especially in social studies, that students really struggle with from time to time. Another enrichment strategy your author talks about is incorporating HOTS, or higher order thinking skills. And these are essentially very important when you look at level 3 on our scales and mastery, and then of course the level 4 extensions. These are the kind of things that we're talking about. Deliberating, concept formation, organizing information, summarizing, classifying, inquiry, forming hypotheses, finding bias in sources. This activity that we're looking at with the young lady and young gentleman here, that was looking at a type of bias, or it was looking at stances for and against. They were drawing conclusions. Other higher interpretation, reading between the lines, what's said but not in the text itself, and taking meaning from conflicting evidence. So taking a look at both those sides, compare and contrast. These are all higher order thinking skills, and the more you incorporate these skills, the more meaningful your lessons are, and the more critical thinking is going to happen along the lines of your instructional goals and curriculum goals. Incorporating simulations and role-playing is, I can't speak about how important it is with social studies. Once again, we're talking about something that sometimes is several hundred years removed from our students. The best way to have them understand is have it hands-on, have them live it, have them do a dramatization, put them in the role of those people. Because the whole goal of simulations is about having them feel something. And they tap into that emotion, and it gives you a bridge between what happened in the past and what happens to them now. Some of the best lessons I ever did involve simulations because it gives them that feeling. It makes that connection. And the second you make that connection, those hundreds of years sometimes that divide them from the historical event melt away because they're incorporating their own feelings and their own experiences to interpret the past. So simulations are some of the best things that we can do as social studies instructors to really convey how did people feel. And it doesn't even have to be acted out. There are tons of different simulations, but there's also a lot of us played the Oregon Trail, whether it was the pixelated cows or the pixelated cows on the Apple IIes, or if you're younger than me, some of the different versions that came out afterwards. But it puts them in the role of a settler going from Missouri out to Oregon and all the trials and tribulations that they go through. That's a type of simulation too, and can be very important to a student's understanding of the difficulties sometimes faced and why people in the past made the decisions they did. And then incorporating music and drama. We talked about this the last time we met. Music is a powerful, powerful tool. Think about your favorite song. You know the lyrics backwards and forwards. You've made a connection not only with the meaning of the song, but because of the music behind it too. So incorporating song, one of the best things I ever did was when I was teaching branches of government to civics classes, is we had songs about every branch of government. And I had students that, when I went to a graduation about a year and a half ago, they came to me and went, Mr. Lammy, we can still sing those songs. We knew the branches of government. When we got to American government, and this is 5 years after they had my class, they still knew the branches of government and how they interacted with each other because of the songs we sung. So never discount music as a giant tool. And drama goes along the lines of what we're looking at when we look at simulations as well. So that covers Chapter 8 for us. So next time I see you, we'll be at the midterm. And take care until then.